You're listening to the Heart and Soul podcast with Kathryn Banco. I'm on a mission to celebrate breakthrough, empowerment, and shameless living in the lives of women everywhere. Join me and let's live unashamed together. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Heart and Soul. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Jennifer Griffith, who is a fellow podcast host. She hosts the very popular podcast About Your Mother, which has actually reached the top 10% of podcasts globally. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
But in addition to that, she's also a new author. Her book came out in November. It's a deeply moving memoir called Both Sides of Then, Finding Love After Abandonment. And it has both the perspective of her mother's point of view and her point of view, just to dig deeper into past and generational trauma and how that affects our future. So Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me. I love your podcast. I love its purpose. Love it.
Thank you. Okay, so why don't you start by telling my listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm a recovering technology sales leader that had the ache to write a book. And I left my tech career 10 years ago to write this memoir, the story of my mom's life. I always knew it should be told because she's had so many, I would say, heartbreaking experiences. I knew she couldn't write it for herself. So I wrote her book in first person, the story of her life being raised in an orphanage in Philadelphia and then having to relinquish her firstborn, my brother, for adoption in the decades before Roe. And then what I realized was I was also writing about myself. So it's a dual memoir, like you said. And it's my passion project and my life's purpose, I would say. But through that, as I was trying to sell my book, I launched my platform and podcast About Your Mother, where your story begins, where I talk to people about their lives and how they're connected to their beginnings. And it turns out people like talking about their mamas. It's an amazing thing. It's, I always trick people, and when I'm doing readings, I say, raise your hand if you're born from a mother. And everybody raises their hand, and then I ask them, well, tell me if you know the woman she was before she became your mom. And it'll surprise you that so few hands go up. And so I think the thing one of the reasons I had to write the book was because at 13, my mom's told me she had found my brother. And I, at 13, I'm sassy and complicated and trying to find myself. And I remember thinking, well, how did you lose a child? And he showed up a month later at 19 years old for my birthday. And my mom in that moment became a woman with a story. She was no longer just my mom. Wow. And so that's how I ended up here at 50 years old with a memoir in hand and a podcast. Yeah.
I love it. I mean, you clearly got stories to tell, and I can't wait to dig deeper into those. But it's true. Like, your mother is definitely the biggest influence in your life from day one. But we often look at our moms as just our moms. Like, we don't think that they had a life before us.
Yep.
And even now, like, I'm 36 and like, I still call my mom every day, and don't ever, like, it's hard for me to be selfless in those conversations and not just like vent about everything that I'm going through and I need from her, instead of asking, like, how are you? Like, she's still just such a caretaker to me. And so it's hard to kind of like relinquish those roles and get to know your mother on a deeper level. So I think that's a brilliant idea. And I think it's probably really therapeutic that you wrote it from both perspectives.
It really was. And I think it was honoring my mother too, because I also tapped into, I say my book goes into 3 buckets. It's the personal journey that people, I think a lot of people can relate to my story of, struggling with self-worth and, becoming, kind of a coming of age story. And then the second thing is I tapped into the historical component of my mom's story, that millions of women found themselves in situations like her, where she was single and she was pregnant and single and was shamed by society and sent to a maternity home to deliver her baby for adoption. And I tapped into this historical piece of it, and where millions of women did this, but they were shamed into silence. And so I became like, it was a bigger thing for me. It was giving my mom and these women a platform, where we could kind of expose how they were shamed and give them a voice. But I will encourage people, as you grow older, to interview your mom and to ask them those questions. And I don't think you should feel guilty relying on your mom that way, because that's probably the happiest part of her day, is being your mom and being there for you. But there is this longer tail thing that I think we can give ourselves, is interviewing our moms, like I said, and understanding their stories, because it really impacts the way that they mother you. And so one of the things that my mom was she was somewhat critical and detached, loving, and loves being my mom, but she was somewhat critical at times, and just not always present. But when I wrote her story, I understood why. I was like, oh, this poor woman is thinking about, every day she's thinking about where her son is, and determined to find him when he's 18. And then I had so much compassion, and I was no longer, how would I say, I didn't have as many conflicting feelings about the mother she was to me. I totally understood her complexity and the emotional baggage that she was carrying, that she couldn't even talk about on the day to day. Yeah, I know it sounds heavy, but it's actually very enlightening and very freeing, incredibly freeing. One of the most freeing things I've ever done.
Oh, I'm sure. And I think that's just a lesson that we need to hear for like all relationships, is sometimes we leave at surface level and we don't get to know the person's story, and because of that we have these like judgments or preconceived notions. And then the second you actually like hear someone's story, did I pause on that
just for a second? Yeah, you're good.
Okay, the second that you actually hear someone's story, it's like, oh, it creates like it expands your heart for them. It creates empathy, it creates love, compassion, like you said. So let's dive deeper into your mother's story, and then the second part we'll dive into your story.
Okay.
Although they collide, obviously.
Yes, they do.
So would you start by telling me a little bit about your mother, and how especially now that you know this, having written the book, how getting pregnant at that age and going through what she went through with your older brother impacted her?
Oh, so much. I think I'll take a step back though, because she was raised in an orphanage, but how she got there is incredibly heartbreaking. Her mother had 3 children under the age of 8, and then was pregnant with twins, and she had the twins and she died shortly after. And so her father was left with 5 kids under the age of 10. And they lived in a poor area of Manayunk, Philadelphia, and he had to put them in a home. And orphanages were actually the foster care system at the time. So he put them in the home, and he ends up dying. And so they are kind of left to be there until they're 18. And my mom had a great experience there. I actually interview her for my podcast that drops next week, so people can hear her voice and telling her story. So she had all of this pain that I always knew about. And then you add this layer of, then she finds herself in this perfect conundrum where there's no sex education. She's raised in this strict Baptist environment, and there's very few reproductive rights. And even no contraception at the time. So she just finds herself out in this world that has changed, and she really was not equipped for it. And when she realizes that she's pregnant, she doesn't really have a lot of options. And so her society, the way that it was, would have shamed her into not, women that kept their babies at the time were shunned by their family. Other families wouldn't play with the children if you were a single mother. And so she just found herself in this situation. And honestly, she can't really talk about it very much. And so what I did is I researched and interviewed other women who went through the similar experience as well. She can tell me so much, right? But then I also did a podcast series on it and interviewed other mothers who found themselves in maternity homes, and was really able to put the pieces together for it. And realize how my mom is the hero is that most of these women never contacted their children. But my mom, based on her experience in the orphanage, which is why it's so important, she said, no, he's going to know who I am. Whether he wants to talk to me or not, I will find him when he's 18. And so she was rogue. She was, she calls herself stubborn, but she was determined to tell him why it happened, and that she loved him. And that's where my mom was, she's a hero in that way. And, kind of broke the mold of what some of these women, they took that secret to their graves.
I can't imagine having that kind of background, like losing your parents.
Yeah.
And being raised in an orphanage at the time. Mm-hmm. But then on top of that, like I'm a mother, and your identity changes the second you get pregnant. It like truly you have this connection, this cell connection with this child. And then for her having in that time to release the child to someone
Mhm.
else, it's got to feel like there's a part of your heart that's like just not beating. Which
Yeah.
sounds dramatic, but it really does. Like, I just feel like being a mother has changed my DNA. So, it's very, I think, honorable that she gave that baby a home. And then also
Yeah.
that she was like, I'm not going to give up on this
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah.
Um, so she was a teenager, you said, when she got pregnant?
No, she actually wasn't. She was in her 20s.
In her 20s. Okay.
So that gives you an idea. And actually, a lot of them were teenagers. Yes, a lot of these young women were teenagers. A high school girl that finds herself pregnant, and she went away for a couple months. She went
Right.
to see her aunt somewhere in the Midwest, but a lot of them were in their 20s, like my mom, and I think that becomes really important because it tells you what the pressure was, from what the message was in society to these young women, that you cannot do this. You
Yeah.
are shamed. You are not honorable. Your child's life is going to be greatly impacted if you raise them alone. But to your point, when I had my son and I was you're having your child, and to your point, you are changed forever. There's this just connection that you have with your child. I immediately thought of her and I thought, oh my gosh, how did she do that?
Yeah.
How on earth? And then she made so much more sense to me in that moment of why sometimes I felt she wasn't present, even though she was there. And I'm sure some of us have had those types of moms that are, they're there, but they're not really engaged. And, they give you love, but there's something missing. There's just some sort of connection that's missing. And that, to your point, was because she had been through that. I could
Yeah.
just feel it every day. And as a mom now, I look at her and I think, oh my gosh, when you walked me to the school bus, you were also thinking about him, wondering if he was okay. And so it did open so many doors of empathy and understanding for my mom, and a lot of forgiveness for, I think, moments in my life where I was like, hello, are you there? you know,
Yeah.
are you there, mom? Can you see me in front of you? And I write about that in the book, and they're little things, but as an adult, I look back and think, oh my gosh, why wasn't she more engaged in that moment? And I do think it's all because of everything that she experienced. And so, what I was saying earlier, it's such a gift to interview your parents and try and understand them on a different level if they're open. And I actually just did, for your listeners, a series of Mother's Day questions that you can ask your mom or reflect on them if they're not with us anymore. So that'll be available to them too if they want them. But,
Oh, I love that.
yeah, I think I just encourage people to do it because it really floors me when people don't, I ask, do you know your mom is the woman she was before she was your mom, and nobody knows. I'm like, oh, well, there's a story in there for you to better understand yourself if
Right.
you can get them to share. Mm-hmm.
Would you mind unpacking a little more about how you were how she raised you, the connections y'all had growing up, and
Yeah.
maybe how her past impacted how you were raised?
Yeah. She was let me say this, a lovely mother, loving, loved being my mom. However, she was raised in an orphanage to marry and have a child. And she was definitely there for my father. So, and being raised in this Baptist environment, one of the things they said is cleave your husband, as if, right? This is just a generation ago, this was all going on. And so she, while she was there for me, the bigger job was my dad. And so in that way, when I had aspirations to be these are true stories, an Olympian, or where I wanted to, not that I had the sport picked out yet, but I had all these aspirations to do something great and big. And it just felt like they were always getting squashed. And that there's one chapter where I write about where I was up for trying out for the Tacoma Youth Symphony. And I was incredibly musically talented because my mom was a pianist. And so I just grew up with music and I could read music at a young age. And I wasn't allowed to try out because it was at night. And it was at night. And at night, that was her time with my dad, to cook for my dad and be with my dad. And so just little things like that compounded over time, where I just always felt like doors were being shut. But now, writing and reliving her story and dipping myself into her skin, I can see why it was that way. You know,
Right.
that was what she was doing, exactly what she was told to do, you know, and her thing was she wanted a normal life.
Mm.
And so it was my dad and me and her, and a dog and a cat, and that was it. You know, that was where it ended. And you know, then other things happened and it got a little bit more complicated. But
What kind of other things?
well,
If you
give you
don't
the
mind.
no, I don't mind at all. Here's chapter one. Um, so my mom sits me down, tells me I have a brother. I'm 13 years old at the time. He comes the next month for my birthday. And then within a couple of months, my dad sits us down and says, I don't want to be here anymore. And stranger than getting a brother for Christmas and having your dad say you no longer wanted to be part of the family, he stayed. And this is where I, as an adult and a mom, really had lots of questions because then we never talked about it. And as you can imagine, that's like a pressure cooker with all of these, you know, tensions going on, but no release valve. There was just no release valve. And so I really wanted to understand how that happened and why that was okay for my mom to stay. Yeah. You know?
And so you grew up, just the three of you, your father, mother, and you, and
Yes.
then you find out you have a brother at
Yeah.
age 13. Are you and him now close, or was it just kind of like a meet and greet situation?
No, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Yes. And one caveat is I did have two sisters who lived on the East Coast, two girls from my father's marriage, but they stayed on the East Coast with their mom. So I was always aching for siblings in the house, right? So when my mom's like, you have a brother, I was like, sweet, you know, she's pregnant. And she's like, no, I'm not pregnant. I found him. And yeah, so it's, what was your question again? I'm so sorry. I lost
I was
it.
just asking what you and your brother's relationship is
Oh,
like.
yeah. So my brother is awesome. He was raised by an incredible family, and we had lots of years where we were really, really close. And then I think, to your point, when you have a child, you change, your perspective changes. And I think it's harder for him now that he has this beautiful family to integrate our family as closely as he had before, which I totally understand. You know, it's, adoption leads to a series of never ending questions. And, you know, questions sometimes they create complexity that you just don't want in your immediate family, you know?
Right.
But he's wonderful and we do talk and, you know, everything worked out for him. And, you know, I think it's great that he knows my mom and that he knows the story as much as he can. And, you know, and that he's gone on to raise an incredible family. Like, for instance, I'm saying this as a proud auntie, but his oldest got into Stanford, you know, everything's charging along. He's doing great.
Yeah. And that's the thing with adoption too, is sometimes you can like break generational chains if you're not like ready to mother by providing a family or giving him to a family who is ready and for him to like feel loved in that way. I'm just thinking back on what you said about like this being just one generation before you and how much has changed in society since then. Like I literally was just on the phone with one of my good friends last night who got divorced a few years ago, and she is going through the process of like, she wants to be a mom, and we're in our older 30s and she can't find a man that she likes. So she's like going through the process of like sperm donor and like becoming a single mother. And like for that to be something that we as women can like own and choose now, in comparison to what your mom went through, where she was like shamed for that. And like, it wasn't even like an option for her to think like, oh, I could just like raise this kid on my own. It's just wild to see it's cool, but it's crazy to see how society is just like evolving. And it's not that long of a time ago, you know?
It's not. And in fact, in my research, I reconnected with a woman who lived in the orphanage with my mom, who ended up in the same situation and decided to keep her child. Her family disowned her. Her son never had play dates with other families. Like it is incredible what she went to. And I'm having a conversation with her going, oh my gosh, I can't believe that so much has changed in just a couple of decades. It's sad and hopeful at the same time, right? And I too, I thought about it before I met my husband. I didn't like my lineup either of men. And I was considering having a baby on my own as well. And that would have been just fine.
Yeah.
And thank goodness for that.
The thing now is, well, the thing with women in general is like we have a ticking clock. Like we don't have long. So if you're in your late 30s and you're single and haven't found your person, that the fact that that's an option and we have resources out there to do that is cool. It's cool.
It's
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 crazy.
great.
It's cool. Yeah.
It's great. And like the old company that I work for now, they pay for you to freeze your eggs. They have a plan where you can freeze your eggs. I love that's part of the dialogue because I had, second child infertility and that was god awful. And so I just love that we're, that we're putting women first, that we're talking about menopause, that all these issues that were buried under whatever society wanted us to look and appear like. I'm glad we're just like breaking that ceiling and
For sure.
putting it all out there.
So how did your mother, how she mothered you, impact how you mother your child?
Oh gosh, do you have another hour? Oh gosh. Cliff Notes. One of the reasons I wanted to write the book is because I do think I am a complex mom. I have a mother wound that, we have a generational mother wound going on here, right? And with my mom losing her mom and my mom being complex and affected by her trauma. And so I, in many ways, wrote the book so that my son could understand me. I didn't want him to wait as long as I had to wait to figure this all out. And so the way that I mother him is, I think I'll follow my mommy sword a little bit. I think I sometimes over mother because I was so unmothered. And my mom will admit that. And it doesn't come from a lack of love. My mom was like, she didn't really know what she was doing. She didn't have a model for it. She was raised in a very strict religious environment that had lots of structure, but not a lot of love and, individualization. They were little children soldiers, if you will. And so I think I overmother sometimes. But on the good side, I tell him I love him constantly. I hug him all the time. I was rarely touched as a child, just because that was the environment. So there's some good things that come from it too. And I think at its core, I was inspired to write the book for him. And isn't that cool? And I know he's proud of me. So that's good. But yeah, I'm a complex mom. I'll give it.
And that's the thing. I think we all are. I mean, we are all a product of how we were raised, whether that be good or bad. And that's why it's so cool that like now it's like really encouraged these days to like go to therapy and like unpack your past and so that you can better understand your current self and your future self for your kids. And we live in a better time where we are encouraged to unpack and use that as a resource for parenting or whatnot.
Oh, absolutely. And I love the changes that we're making. And I love that we're giving women voices, but mother voices as well. It's a complex role, and I think even I'm almost 2 decades older than you. I was in that age when I was like in my 20s and 30s where they're like, you can have it all. You can do everything. And let me tell you something, we were dying. Like we were doing too much. And Sheryl Sandberg with Lean In, I got the message, but the message was also a little off. It's easy for certain people to lean in who have tons of resources, but there were some of us who didn't have those resources, who were working just as hard. And so I wrote a series called Lean Out. Yeah. where I had this huge corporate job. I loved my job. I had a baby at home. I was racing to the city every day and I was giving myself IVF shots on business trips and in the bathroom. And after I had my second miscarriage, I was like, what am I doing? This is insane. So I think each mother generation, we're getting better and better. And I like that. I feel like this kind of current age of working moms on the younger side are making more of a stand and saying, no, I'm not doing all of it at the same time. I'm going to make choices. Do you feel that way? That there's a shift in that dialogue?
I definitely see a shift. I think like just as women in general, we're kind of like encouraged to wear a lot of hats. Yeah. And like, I think us being, natural nurturers and I'm like a natural like perfectionist, like it's hard not to want to be good at everything and like accomplish everything and say you can. But then the reality is you can't. Like when I had my son, my business changed a little bit. When I had my daughter, it changed a lot. And by choice, it was not like my husband telling me you need to let go so you can parent our kids. It was me being like, okay, in this season of life, I can't do it all. And that's okay. And giving myself like grace there, where I feel like hustle culture, even in the last 10 years has really changed, but hustle culture kind of like demands that you just give it your all to everything, and you can do it all. Like you can be a great mom, a great wife, and like run a business and yada yada yada, and still be active and like all these things that you love to do, but you just can't. And so there are sacrifices that you have to make. And yeah, I think our generation is like learning that and giving ourselves a little more grace of like, okay, I can't do
I
it.
think so. I love that. And this season of life. And, you know, identifying that there are chapters and that you don't have to deplete yourself. In certain chapters, you're doing certain things, and that's okay. I love that. I love
Yeah,
it.
I think I have to remind myself of the chapters because I I had I didn't have kids late, but in the South I had kids later.
Yeah.
And so I spent my 20s like starting my business and building it up, and then 32 I get pregnant, and I kind of would compare myself to my mom, who she had me at 30, but by the time I was in kindergarten she like started a brand new career and became really successful. And I think I like kind of beat myself up of like, I'm really not like financially where my parents were when they had children or yada yada yada. But it's
Yeah.
like, well, I chose to have kids later in my 30s, and I do have to relinquish some like financial freedom
Mhm.
because of that. But like when I'm 40 and my kids are in kindergarten and I have more time, like maybe I can like push into something bigger and better and like that be that season for that. And this is just not the season to excel in a career.
Yep. I think, and good for you for owning that and accepting it, and you know, and recognizing that you're doing really good work. You know, you're
Yeah.
raising these humans, and that's hard while taking care of yourself, I hope.
Yes, I do.
Good.
Yes, and thankfully I have support from I have an awesome husband, and I literally work in a gym, so it's kind of nice. Like if I need to like work out, I can like just go to work.
I love it. That's great.
Yes. Okay, so we are getting to the end of my child's nap, so I want to ask you some
Yeah.
questions
Yes. Okay.
before we log off.
Respect the nap. Respect and
Respect the
honor
nap.
it.
Speaking of seasons of life,
Yeah.
so I have these questions that I ask my guests at the end of every episode. I haven't been
Mhm.
asking them as much this season, but I feel called to kind of throw them at you. I didn't prepare
Okay.
you, but here we go. Um, okay, and I'm gonna try and rewrite them towards like your story, but I don't know if it's gonna
Okay.
come out right. We'll see.
Okay.
Okay, what is something that you really love about yourself as a mother right now?
My desire and commitment to evolving to his maturity and his desire for independence. That's
Okay,
hard.
yeah. Especially when you have to let go because you've been like their caretaker, and then they get older and you're like, no, I can't.
Watching, yeah, opening the door and letting them fail or, you know, learn the lessons because it's so deeply connected to your heart
Yeah.
is it's big.
Okay, so taking out the mother role of that question, what is something that you just love about yourself in general right now?
Oh, that's so sweet. I love what my book is doing in terms of the conversations that it's sparking. I absolutely love it. I'm really proud of it.
Yeah.
Super proud. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. What is something that you're really looking forward to in the rest of this year?
Taking a break and going to Europe with my husband.
Where are you going?
Oh, we're going to Switzerland and France and south of France and then Paris. And because my son's going to a camp and we haven't done this. The last time we did it was in 2019, right before the pandemic. So we have not been on a vacation like just the two of us like this. And oh my gosh, what now? 6 years almost.
6 years, yeah.
Mhm.
It's time.
It's time.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
Okay, if you could leave my listeners, actually, no, I'm gonna end with that one. My next question: what is something that you're just currently kind of obsessed with right now? Like we were talking about pop culture before we pressed record, but like it can be something so silly as like a food you love, or like a show you're binging, or whatever. Just something you're obsessed.
Oh, I'm going to tell you, and it's a good one. Because my son was a child, I can't believe that I was not addicted to the show, but I am going through a total Gossip Girl moment. And yeah, and I'm having really big feelings about Chuck Bass, and I need to just not season 1 or season 2, but you know, his glow up, I guess they call it, the kids call it. The glow up is really intense for me. I think it's just because I'm 50 and I didn't watch it because he was a baby at the time. But Gossip Girl and I are having a really good time.
It's a phenomenal show. Also, as you're watching, you kind of realize how horrible Serena is.
Oh,
Like,
she's
she's the
terrible.
worst. And like they kind of in the beginning paint her out to be, the protagonist. And you're like, no, Serena's
No,
like not it.
it's all Cher. It's Chuck and Blair.
It's Chuck and Blair. They are it.
They are it. And then I'm gonna little anecdote because when I find something I really like, I go really deep. So maybe we'll do a pop culture podcast, just you and I next time. Oh, because I'm all over the board. But what I really love about this is their chemistry. And actually, they rewrote the show after they did the pilot because Chuck and Blair had such chemistry that they rewrote the entire show and they became the central characters because Leighton and Ed had such on-screen chemistry. He was supposed to be this like bad boy villain character that wasn't center. I read that. Yeah, I've gone all the way deep on this, and I just love watching two people connect like that on screen, and then millions of people get to enjoy it. I just think it's cool. You know, I just think, and I try and imagine if you're an actor and you get that part and you find yourself like in that moment. How cool is that?
Yeah. Because when they introduced Chuck, he was a bad boy.
He was bad. He had a terrible haircut. His clothes were terrible. And then they, did the glow up on him. And he owns that part, which I just think is cool.
It's amazing what a little like wardrobe and glow up will do for anyone.
Oh, totally.
Oh, yeah. Okay. My last question is what is something, if you had to leave a little Post-it note of like encouragement or like a little like, you got this Post-it note on our listeners' mirrors, what would it say?
Your story matters.
Love it. Your story does matter.
Your story matters. We all have a story to tell and they all matter. And then go ahead.
I was going to say, and get to know other people's stories so that you, like we said earlier, can like better understand the people in your life.
The people in your life. And then in the end, when you do that work, like you really own your story and, you do something with it, whatever, your podcast, you journal about it, you write a book, I don't care what it is. Then you realize your story isn't about you anymore. So you asked me what's the really cool thing going on now is that I put my story in the world, but now it's not even really about me. It's about what other people do with it. And that's magic, That's magic.
This is so dumb, but pop culture me is like connecting that with Taylor Swift.
Oh, please. Yeah.
So she wrote this song All Too Well back in like 2012, 2011. I'm obsessed with Taylor Swift and it's kind of like a thing. But it's like this song that wasn't even supposed to be a single but it was released on her Red album and like all of her fans were obsessed with it and they made it what it was, like really popular because of the storytelling. It's a true story about her and Jake Gyllenhaal, whatever. Well, now, years later, when she's doing her rewrites, she releases a 10-minute version of that song. And in it, even more so with added lyrics and more story. And it even more so is like the fan favorite. And then recently, when she released her last album, the last song of the album reflects on the journey of All Too Well, the song. It's called The Manuscript. And she's like, the whole point is, that manuscript, that original writing was about me, but now the story's not even about me anymore. It's for y'all. It's about y'all. And anyways, that was like such a long-winded way of saying like, yes, your story doesn't become about you anymore.
I'm so glad you shared that because I'm flying. I'm going to a book event in Ohio. And so I'm going to double click into this like I double clicked into Chuck Bass. I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Yes.
But it is like that. It is. When you put your energy out there and you do the work, right? And you're just curious and you follow your curiosity, it leads you to just incredible places. And that's really all I did. I just became really curious about my family.
Also, I've noticed like with this podcast, like I don't know who's listening. It could be like just my mom, or it could be, a random stranger on the internet. But I found that even with this podcast or with just like sharing things on social media, I'll get like DMs from people that are like we could probably talk about this a whole nother episode, but I've lost 4 babies. I've had 4 miscarriages.
Oh,
and
honey, I'm sorry.
It's okay. But I have women that I do not know all the time because I've shared those stories on the podcast, slide into my DMs and be like, I'm currently miscarrying. What do I do? Or how should I feel? Or what steps did you take next? And it's crazy to think like my miscarriages, yes, they are deeply like ingrained in my soul, and I'll never like get past that trauma, but I can use it to help someone else. And so it's not really about me anymore. It's about these other women who get to hopefully have a resource for what they're going through. So anyways.
I'm so glad you're doing that, because those miscarriages, people don't talk about it. I think there's so much shame in those, and hurt. And yeah, I remember writing about mine a couple of years ago, and yeah, there's just so many women who experience that, and they just don't have anywhere to go. Right. So keep sharing that. I know, but that is the magic. You just nailed it. It's no longer about you. You're helping others. And that's just awesome. I love it.
And you are helping others too on your podcast and through your book. What is
Thank
the
you.
best way for my listeners to connect with you? And obviously I'll put like the links in the show notes for you listeners, so you can like buy her book and listen to her podcast. But what's the best way that they connect with you?
All my handles are byjennifergriffith.com. So byjennifergriffith.com. There's another Jennifer Griffith out there. Shout out to her. She's an author as well. She's got a lot of books out there, but yeah, it's hard. We're SEOing each other like crazy. Yeah. So I know, I was like, gosh, should I change my name? So byjennifergriffith.com, and that's Instagram, my website. I'm on Substack as well, and Facebook, a little bit, and LinkedIn, but the website has it all. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, listeners, I will link that in the show notes. And Jennifer, it was so good getting to know you, and we will have to like connect again in the future about pop culture.
Can we? Oh, yeah. I will come talk to you about it anytime.
Yes, it's like a passion of mine. So
me too. Do you read the Daily Mail?
I do. And did you like? I'm like big on following like Page 6 on Instagram. Like it's really bad, but
same.
Basically, like Gossip Girl in real life, I follow her. Memoir. I don't know if you follow them. You got to follow them. She knows she knows all the like celebrity tea, and she basically releases it on Instagram as if she is Gossip Girl. And
oh my gosh. Okay.
In that era, you need to like connect with her. Again,
this Gossip Girl just came on my plate, and it's been a big moment. My husband's like, oh my gosh, are you going up to watch that again? I'm like, yeah. No, I'm all the way in. Chair.
What season are you on?
I'm going to admit something. I watched it all the way through, and I'm rewatching it again because I would fall asleep. So now I have to watch it when I'm like not falling asleep.
I understand that. It's comforting.
It is.
Well, okay. Thank you so much for joining me. And listeners, I will talk to you next week. Bye. Okay.
Thanks for listening to Heart and Soul. If this episode encouraged you in any way, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Talk to you next week.